You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Today's podcast is with Jason Lee, one of the co-founders of TomYum. As Jason puts it, TomYum is a design partnership that is working its way to become a product design agency, and I'm definitely rooting that it will become an agency by Jason's definitions in the near future as he continues to grow the company. Jason is a fellow accounting alum from the University of Waterloo, but unlike many in our program, like myself included, he did not pursue the accountant's path by joining a Big Four and getting a CA. He had initially intended to, but he started listening to his heart and pursued product design after graduating. And many of my fellow business friends think a transition to designer without an artistic or technical background is not possible, but Jason has done it. We talk about how he built up a portfolio and what he had in the portfolio, his experience working at Thanx, a Sequoia-backed startup, and his experience coming back to Toronto and building a design agency, and just how the tech environment in Toronto is actually very much booming, and what made him come to Toronto compared to staying in San Francisco back with his successful, the operating startup. And so before we go into the conversation, quick reminder to support the podcast by leaving it a 5-star review on iTunes, and even leaving a positive review about it in any way it might have helped you. Really helps the podcast reach a wider audience, and I would really appreciate it. And in showing that appreciation, I will definitely give you a shout out in the next podcast introduction. And yeah, so without further ado, if you are an aspiring designer, this is definitely the chat for you. But if you're not an aspiring designer like me, this will continue to be a fun and eye-opening conversation to breaking into the field of product design. So I hope you enjoy my chat with Jason Lee. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast we have Jason Lee from TomYum. Hey Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Jason here is the co-founder of TomYum, and Jason, for our audience members who are not familiar with TomYum, could you describe the company, please?
Yeah, so I would describe us as an independent team of designers. So we work a lot with startups, tech companies in particular, to help them build and design their product, their brand, and their website.
Gotcha. And so when you say independent team, what do you mean by that?
So I don't want to use the label agency or studio. I don't think we're quite there yet. So right now, TomYum is just me and my design partner, and we have a couple of freelance designers that we reach out to. We don't have a physical office space. So I think independent team of designers is just my humble way of saying we're not quite there yet, but we're up and coming.
Gotcha. And the name TomYum, where did that come from? Do you guys, is that an idea to specialize in food companies? I know your clients are not necessarily just food companies, but how did it happen?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So TomYum was actually going to be a food discovery app. So food is a big interest of mine. I love to discover new restaurants. And the original idea for TomYum is it's this place where you discover what to eat based off of what your friends have eaten or people that you follow have eaten. So the issue with Yelp and Google is you see all these reviews for these restaurants, but everyone's reviewing for different reasons. Now, imagine you have this app that lets you see what people you trust have eaten at specific restaurants. It's almost like a special catered menu towards you when you open up the app. That's what TomYum was going to be. It was a food discovery app, but as I began to design and build that app, more design work started coming in, and there was no actual time to build the app, so I sort of pivoted it into an agency, and I didn't want to come up with a new name because I incorporated TomYum already, so now we're TomYum Designs.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So do you have a big Instagram account with a lot of food pictures?
No, I wish. I wish.
Are you working on that?
I had an account for some time. I wouldn't say it was big. Like it only had a few hundred followers, and I was posting food photos every day. And that was sort of in anticipation of this app. I wanted to build an audience of foodies. But I just, that was abandoned as I got more and more busy.
Gotcha. And I want to take our, I guess, chat to an earlier era for you. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up around here?
Yes. I grew up in Markham, and I was there since I was about 7 years old, so mostly from around here.
Gotcha. And when you were like 6 or 7, what kind of dream career did you have?
I had a few. I think the earliest career I remember is being like one of those like lion dancers for those Chinese New Year, like those lion dance guys. I wanted to be that. I don't remember why. I think I just saw one and I thought they were really cool jumping around, and I sort of wanted to do that. I wanted to be a detective at one point. I don't remember why. Maybe I think it was because I watched Inspector Gadget. And then one point I wanted to be a comedian because I heard they make a lot of money, and then I realized it wasn't that funny, so I really didn't move forward with that. And then another career I wanted to be a movie director. I don't know why, but that was one of the jobs I wanted to do.
All right. Quite slightly exotic,
yeah,
I want to say. And I don't think it's that too dissimilar from your current role as a designer, actually. You gotta be you gotta be very creative in all those fields, and you told me about how you started actually selling logos and stuff on 99 Designs in high school. Were you always kind of into art as a younger student?
Yeah, I went to art school. I learned sketching, I learned watercoloring, and that's just because my parents wanted me to have extracurriculars. But I was always into design. I think it was grade 7 when I first picked up my bootleg version of Photoshop, and I was, designing forum avatars and forum signatures, and design was always something that I was interested in.
Gotcha. And when you say art school, is it like some special immersive program that you go through?
No, it was just like Saturday afternoon classes.
Got it. And so when I look at your LinkedIn profile, you went from University of Waterloo, the accounting and finance program. So same alma mater, same program. I think you were a year ahead of me, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we really interacted much. And so for people who don't know, our program has a co-op system, and you went through a bunch of business co-ops that didn't really seem to resonate much well with like being a designer, and then you ended up going to New York with a UX UI like design internship. So how did that switch come about? Or first, actually take me to why did you go to accounting when you knew you liked design?
Why
did you do accounting?
That's a good question. I get asked that a lot. So I thought I was good at accounting. It was in grade 11 when I took my first accounting class, and the teacher, I was like getting perfect in all my accounting tests, and the teacher made me feel really good about it. So I was like, accounting is amazing. I'm really good at it. Grade 12 was when I sort of got the early signs that I wasn't so good at it, but I still wanted to go through and be an accountant. I think at that time, CAs were pushing, like they had this huge marketing push. Everyone wanted to be a CA. I wanted to be a CA, even though I didn't know what that actually meant in the real world. And then when time came around to pick a university, I just was like, okay, I'm going to go to Waterloo. Waterloo has a great accounting program. They have co-op. So I picked Waterloo. And then I think it was in my first year when I started realizing like I really, really hated accounting. And my grades were bad in first year. And that's like, first year accounting, AFM should be pretty easy.
Yeah, no, so that part actually resonated really well with you because, so for me, I'd never taken accounting before. I didn't know what accounting was. I had no idea what economics and any of that stuff was because my high school back when I was in Vancouver didn't offer any business electives. Yep. So when I applied to school, I applied for engineering at Waterloo, and I got the full like engineering scholarships and everything, and I just applied to accounting as like a side thought. I was like, I like people a lot. I like talking to a lot of people. I heard engineers don't get to do a lot of that. I heard business does. I think accounting is like business. I'm just gonna apply it, and it just eventually I just on a whim just decided to just do accounting last minute. But when I went into Waterloo, my first year was devastating just because I had never taken accounting before, but everyone else had done it in high school, and everyone was saying, "Oh, it's so easy," and
Yep.
no one showed up to class. Everyone just got it. My professors were just awful because I remember first class she asked the question of how many of you have taken accounting in high school. So everyone puts their hand up except me, and she goes, "Oh, great, this must be easy for you then," and then she just blazes past it, which was so counterintuitive because now people who didn't get it were even more behind, and so yeah, like I had an existential crisis of whether I wanted to be an accountant in the first year as well, but I obviously went through with it. But for you, how did that experience like change you?
So to go back to your question earlier, why
Sorry,
did I
yeah,
stick with designing? Because
Yeah.
I think it'll sort of play into this answer. I knew design was always an interest of mine, so I knew that I would learn it on my own, so I wanted to sort of diversify my skill set. So that's why I went into accounting while knowing that I can learn design on the side. And I think even in my first year, like I was following along everyone else. Everyone wanted to be a CA, and to be a CA, you need to get a job at a Big Four accounting firm. So I tried all of that. My grades weren't good enough, so I tried for the banks. Again, my grades weren't good enough. So what was my first? Yeah, my first co-op job was like an unpaid internship at Investors Group, and I got that outside of Waterloo Works or whatever it was called back then, Job Mine, and I had to find that on my own. So I was doing marketing and I was doing cold calling for my first job, and then from there I went to Ontario Power Generation where I did general business stuff. And then I moved on to RBC Capital Markets, not doing actual finance. I was again supporting the front office, back office. I don't remember. Again, doing more Excel stuff. I don't remember your question.
No, the question was like how you even got into accounting in the first place when you already knew that you liked to design, and so
Yeah. It was all the marketing.
Yeah.
CA did a great job with their marketing push.
I also think there was that thing with each generation has those moments in history that impact a shift, and for me, I think the thought of an accountant came in because when we were in high school, the financial crisis had happened, and you see all these kids who graduate from university without jobs in so many fields, but for some reason people kept on saying accounting is so stable, you're not gonna be jobless even in a crisis, which is not true, because I was a consultant whose job was to get rid of waste, or not waste but highly costly things, and that's what accountants are for organizations. So my job at some points were to actually fire as many accountants as we could from some companies. So that myth was debunked. But yeah, I think there was like kind of that generational thing where the accounting thing was the thing for everyone to go to. Because I remember so many people went into accounting during our period, and nowadays not that many people actually go anymore because now we've been in a bull cycle for so long in the markets.
Yeah, you do bring up a good point. I think the timing wise, right, made people think about job stability, and accounting did seem like a very stable job at the time. And also being Asian, you want to appeal to your Asian parents, and accounting is like one of the professions that an Asian parent would want you to go into. So
right, I didn't know that either until I came to Waterloo.
Right.
Yeah, because my parents were a little, I think, luckily they were very accepting of the Western cultures. Like they told me not to be a lawyer or a doctor because they said I'd be miserable, and I said I want to do business. And then that's when my dad just recommended. He's like, oh, then maybe you should do accounting, because I heard it's like if you want to do business and you want to know the language of business, and that's what accounting is. So I was like, oh, good point. All right, I'll do that. So when you were in school, like, how did you build up this design skill set? Were you taking classes on the side, or how did you learn?
So I was still designing logos and selling them on 99 Designs, and that was actually a big, big thing for me, because that was the first time I realized that people are willing to pay for my design work. So while I was in school, I sort of I stepped aside from 99 Designs, and I started, pitching design service to other people. I'd had a few small jobs here and there, but the biggest exposure to design was back in second year when I started to work on my own startup, or let's say project. I don't want to label it startup because we never really got anywhere. But I was the designer for that project, and with two other co-founders, we spent a couple of years trying to build it and market it, and that really was what exposed me to design.
Was it an app that you were building?
Yes, so it was a social address book app, and the idea really came up when I was at a conference and all these people were exchanging their contact information and their social media information. And I met these two guys at a conference, and we were so pumped. It was an entrepreneurship conference, so like there were all these really successful entrepreneurs there, and we were like, yeah, like we got to start our own company together. And we realized like, there's an opportunity in creating an app that simplifies the way you exchange contact information. So this app was meant to solve the issue of having outdated address books, as well as like having one place to put all your social media stuff. And instead of like, you updating your address book with my new number and my new information, all I need to do is I update it on my end and it gets pushed to all my contacts. So it's like sort of flipping the way address books are typically updated. So we thought that was a good opportunity, and we tried building that out.
And why didn't you, I guess, quote unquote, succeed or make it actually become a startup?
We were moving too slowly. There were people that were dedicating their full time into building this. Some people went into Y Combinator. Some companies went into Y Combinator. Some companies were able to raise seed funding, and then there were already better products out there. And we realized one issue with our idea is that it was just simply a utility app, and we didn't have a reason for people to come back and open up the app over and over again. So like, you would only open up the app when you want to exchange contact information for someone, and that's not enough engagement that we would have liked. So we decided to stop.
And you kept on still pursuing business-based co-op terms while you were in school until it seems close to the end of it when you decide to say, no more, I'm just going to go into design. What was the tipping point moment? Like, why did you say, because the initial premise was, okay, I'm going to diversify, get the CA, and still work on my design, but you ended up just saying, fuck this shit, I'm just going to go straight to design.
Yeah.
What happened?
I think it was up until my third co-op term where a part of me still wanted to, go into business or do accounting. I thought I could do it. And just so my third term was at RBC, and having worked in a bank, I was like, no, this is not where I want to be. Like, this place is draining. I'm like, I'm just doing Excel for everyone. Like all these people who have graduated from school working at this bank at RBC Capital Markets, like they don't know how to do Excel. So they're telling me, a co-op kid, to do all their Excel work, and I'm just like learning everything as I go. So like I became the Excel guy in the office, and I was like, I don't want to work with people like this when I graduate. So for my fourth co-op term, I told myself I wanted to do something different. And design was something that I was really, really passionate about. So I saw a posting for a UX position in New York City, and I was like, well, that's really, really different than what I've been doing. So I went for it.
Yeah, and you make it sound it's so easy, where it's an accounting student with a bunch of business co-op terms finally applying for a UX UI position in New York. So connect the dots for me there. Because I don't think many would have even considered that, even if they had any inkling of wanting to design, did you have a whole portfolio built ahead of time to apply for it? Like, what was the process like?
So my portfolio was just a bunch of random things pieced together. So let's see, I had the app that I had designed, and at that point we already had a few iterations of it. So I had a few versions of the app designed to show, and I was able to tell the story of how we got from point A to wherever we ended up. And then I had some logos to show. I was also one of the design guys at AFSA, so I was designing posters and other stuff like that. So I had graphic design examples to show, which now that I think about it, like it was kind of weird because this was a user experience design job. And even when I was applying to it, I didn't really know what user experience meant. So I showed them all this graphic design work, and I guess I got lucky because they took me. But like, I think even like 2 months into that job, I was like, why aren't we designing the visual part of it? Like, why are we just like talking to people and designing wireframes? Like, let me do the visual, the pretty side of it too. And then that's when I realized, oh, like I was a UX designer. I wasn't a designer.
Gotcha. So how would you like to explain to someone like me who's not a designer and not that familiar with the field? When people say UX UI designer, they're talking about two completely separate different things, right? UI is one form and UX is one form, correct?
Yes. So I have a different view on that, but UX and UI are different. So there are UX designers, and UX stands for user experience. So their focus is more on interviewing users, understanding their needs, coming up with user personas, and all this stuff that sort of feeds into the wireframes that they create.
So what's a wireframe?
A wireframe is just a really rough sketch of what you want the design to be like.
Gotcha. So just like frames of how an app interface would look.
Yeah, think about like an
things.
app interface without like the pretty colors or the pretty visual layer over it.
Gotcha.
So it's the wireframe. So the reason they do that is because their focus is more on the experience, the user flow, and like what one button, like what, yeah, on the overall experience. So UI designer is more of the visual side of it. They take the UX designer's wireframe, they add color, they make sure that it's according to brand, they make it attractive. So when people say UX UI together, they sort of like they're trying to combine those two design roles. And to me, that's what I think design should be. It's like a UI designer should also be considering the user experience, and the user experience designer should also be considering the look and feel of it, because all that plays together at the end. But people like to separate the two.
Right, and yeah, it seems I totally agree with what you're talking about, where it seems that, why would you compartmentalize it? It seems that you still want to be able to see the full picture and actually understand the full flow. And I guess that's what also some people just call product designers.
Yep.
Okay.
So I sort of see product designers as similar to UX UI. Product designers, in my definition, like they consider more of the business side of things too. So it's not just about making a pretty interface that works well, that's intuitive, but it's also like considering the whole business aspect, like how is this going to achieve our business objectives? And product designers, come up with new features and ideas to move the business forward.
Gotcha. And so from your time in New York, you get this user experience, design experience, and it's not exactly what you anticipated, but at the same time, it's probably better than what you did at the bank.
Yes.
And so you come back to school, and so now what's going into your head? What direction are you thinking of taking?
Yeah, so I was like, this is cool. I got some UX design experience. It was I learned a lot from it. I learned how to do user interviews, how to talk to people, and I learned the importance of that. So I took that as a base, and I wanted to build on top of it. I wanted to become a product designer. I wanted to be able to do the full stack of design work. So I think New York was like really what made me realize, like, okay, enough of trying to go down this business route, enough of trying to become an accountant. Like, this is who I really am. I should move full speed ahead with accounting and finance. With design. But by then, I had one more term of school left, so I might as well finish it and get my degree.
Gotcha. And were you thinking of doing any additional form of education to be a designer, like boot camps or other courses, or going back to school, like going to like OCAD or something in Toronto? Did those kind of thoughts enter your mind, or was it just straight up, I'm just going to find a job as a designer somewhere else?
No, I had enough of school. I wanted to just get out there and learn things on my own. I feel like my view on education, and this doesn't apply to everything, but like it's better to learn by doing the actual work than just to sit in school and read a textbook.
Yeah, practice over theory.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so, like after graduating, you ended up joining, how do you pronounce it? Thanx? Thanx, yeah. Mm-hmm. With an X. And Thanx was a well-funded startup down in San Francisco. It was funded by Sequoia for its Series A. How did you go about finding that opportunity?
Yeah, so there was a few months between graduation and joining this company where I was able to build up my portfolio a little bit more. So I did a few more freelancing jobs. I did a lot of unsolicited redesigns. So, I knew I didn't have case studies on my portfolio, and at the same time, I didn't have that many clients I worked with. So what I did was I took something that I didn't think was designed well, and I redesigned it, and I wrote blog posts about why I designed things that way. And that sort of gave prospective employers like a preview into the way I think. And that was sort of what was able to land me the job in San Francisco. And again, I think I got lucky, but worked out.
Oh no, I think you make your own luck. You're working hard and you're constantly building up this portfolio. Like, so, I'm not very familiar with the portfolio element of what designers mean when they're saying I'm going to build a portfolio and I'm going to work on a portfolio and then going to apply to this job or get another gig. Is there a point where you're supposed to feel ready about a portfolio? Like, is there some kind of benchmark where you should have 10 ideas or 10 projects done, where one's an app, one's a desktop application? Like, is there some kind of benchmark that you're relying on?
So I think it depends on what sort of design job you're applying for. So if you're applying to be a product designer, typically product design interviews ask you to pick 2 or 3 things from your portfolio to talk about. So if you have 2 or 3 things that you are able to talk about in your portfolio, that's enough, and you can go apply for jobs that way. Yeah. Gotcha.
And these freelancing gigs, how did you find them? Through like Upworks or?
Some of them were referrals, some of them were cold emails. There was only like 4 or 5 that I actually did, so it wasn't that much. Mostly from referrals.
Wow. And so then are you just predominantly working for like startups and helping them actually design their application, like their main product?
So I think even back then I didn't have much product design experience. I was doing graphic design. So I was doing like infographics, website designs, one-pagers, landing pages. It wasn't actually product design. So my only product design experience at that time was designing my own app. And eventually when I joined Thanx, I was able to get a lot more of that experience.
Got it. So now if I wanted to then get a better definition of graphic design versus product design, how would you say they're different?
So graphic design is much more visual oriented. So think about posters, branding, marketing. All that requires graphic design, and it's not necessarily about how people are interacting. It's not about user flow. It's not about how people are interacting with the app. It's more about conveying a message visually. So graphic design, my definition doesn't encompass UI, UX. Product design is more about like designing an app or just an experience, a digital experience that people interact with on their screens, whether it's your mobile phone or on their computer.
Got it. And what made you want to be more of a product designer from a graphic designer? Because you already were doing a lot of graphic design.
Yeah, you make more money as a product designer. It's that simple.
How much is it materially more?
For me, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can be open with the money. So I went based off of my research, and again, this is just my research, so I don't know how true it is. But graphic designers make anywhere from 60, 70K. Product designers can make over $100,000. So it's that simple.
Got it. And so you ended up going to Thanx, and you're in San Francisco, and you spent about 2 years there, right? As
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And after that, instead of joining another startup, you came back to Toronto, and that's when you created TomYum and are now part of a partnership. What was the transition like there? Why did you decide to leave Thanx and come back to Toronto?
I think I was able to learn what I wanted to learn at Thanx. I wanted to go down there to experience what design was like in Silicon Valley. It's San Francisco, so San Francisco is actually not part of Silicon Valley, but that whole environment still exists.
The Bay Area.
Yeah, the Bay Area. I wanted to learn product design. So at Thanx, I was able to wear a lot of hats. So I was not only doing the product design, I was designing the website, the brand, sales collateral, marketing material, pitch decks for the CEO. And I was able to experience a lot of that. So one of the reasons to come back was because, I knew the startup scene in Toronto is booming, and it's still booming. And I think it's just a really good opportunity to come back and say, hey, I designed in the Bay Area. I can wear multiple design hats. You don't need to hire a design agency. You don't need to hire 3-4 designers to do all these different things. I can do all of that. So that was my main pitch to startups. It's like, work with me instead of multiple other people.
And how effective has that been? This the pitch of, I was at a very well funded startup in Silicon Valley, compared to like if you were just another product designer in Toronto. Is there a kind of bias that is in favor?
There is a bias, and to be honest, I really don't know if there's any real difference. But to be able to tell that story is very, very convincing to people.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the designers in Toronto are very talented. I wouldn't think that designers back in the Bay Area are any better than designers here.
And you have no I guess because I feel like there's a notion where a lot of engineers or tech talented people want to stay in San Fran and just want to be part of that that ecosystem too, which is also continuously booming. I don't know at the rate that it's continuously growing at, but it is the hub. And so, do you ever miss that?
I miss San Francisco.
Oh, you do?
I miss the people there, but I think Toronto is starting to have that sort of same boom, and I think I want to be here to experience that because it's just going to keep growing and growing here. I think it's more exciting to be in Toronto than it is to be in San Francisco.
Oh wow!
Mm-hmm.
What really makes you feel that? How do you know that there's a boom? What kind of tell signs have you experienced yourself?
There's just more and more startups popping up. More companies are raising lots of investor money. Investors back in the States want to invest in companies in Canada and Toronto. So just that general shift is something that I've noticed, and a lot more people are talking about tech now. A lot of my accounting and finance colleagues are trying to move into tech, and that was something that I haven't noticed in the past few years. It's more of a recent thing.
It's true. I was actually talking about it earlier today too, about how a lot of my accounting friends are kind of I'll catch up with them, and then I'll say, so what are you up to? And they're saying, oh, I want to leave, and instead of the traditional industry route where you go be an accountant for a big CPG company or a bank, be a controller somewhere, they're all saying, oh, I think I want to take some risks, and I want to join a tech company, I want to join a startup. And yeah, I think that number has definitely greatly increased in the past year or year or two for sure. And so for the decision though of actually coming back and not joining another tech company in Toronto, but instead choosing to go down that partnership route, what was your decision process there? You said you were trying to create TomYum, but you were still taking on freelance work on the side.
Yes.
So yeah, what was your thought process behind all that?
I don't think I wanted to join a company right when I come back. I think there's a few things. So I think at this point in my life, I'm able to take a little bit more risk. And to me, taking more risk means not having to settle down into a full-time job. Money isn't a very, very big thing that I need right now. So, I came back with some savings, and that saving sort of allowed me to, work a year without thinking oh crap, now I need to go find a job. I can work at my own pace, and I can experiment. And I think this is my time because eventually I'm gonna have to start a family, and I'll have real adult responsibilities. So before that begins, I wanted to give it one more shot.
And so that one more shot was creating TomYum for the year.
That was creating TomYum for the year, and again, TomYum, it was more of an online brand. I was still freelancing, and I still am freelancing on the side. TomYum is just an identity that I can use to say this is who we are. it's like I feel like it's easier to market myself as a company than an independent team of designers.
Until you eventually become an agency.
Exactly.
And so when you're actually going out to find these corporate clients, like you have pretty big corporate clients, and how do you get them in the first place? Like, do you just knock on their door by like cold emailing someone there and saying, "Hey, I'm a designer from San Fran. Do you need work? Like, do you need work done?"
Yeah, a lot of it is cold emailing, and cold emailing does not work most of the time. What we found now is like as we begin to do more and more work for people, word of mouth goes a really, really long way. I think we get most our business now comes from referrals. I do have one corporate client, and that was from sending a cold email, and somehow that worked out. But besides that, I would say it's just referral based.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think even for this podcast right now, I would say a lot nowadays. Most of my podcast interviews actually happen from guests that were referrals from past guests instead of me cold emailing a bunch of people. And yeah, I think over time, like I've learned to like the warm introductions just take you a long way in so many different ways. But I think the hard part is like getting the first client. How did you go about proving that to like the first client?
So that was very difficult because again, TomYum is a partnership, and we wanted to market ourselves as one entity. And I think early on we didn't know how to do that. So in our early client meetings, like it was me and my partner sitting down, and we would show them our individual portfolios. And the feedback that we got was like, "Why? I feel like I'm hiring two people. I'm not hiring like an agency. I'm not hiring one entity." So we went back to the drawing board, and we figured like, how can we sort of still use our port? I mean, that's the only work we had. We didn't have any work as a company. But how can we sort of like fake it till we make it, and like position our work as if we did this as one entity? So we redid our portfolio, and again, it was like a lot of it was cold emailing. And I think our first real client was a referral. It was a referral from another friend, and we sort of used from there on. It was just like a chain of referrals that was able to get us to where we are now.
And is the use of freelance designers a very common thing in the Toronto tech ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's. Just speaking for ourselves, I think it's a better choice than to bring on someone full time. We also can't afford someone full time, so hiring freelance designers is sort of like a middle ground. Actually, I think I misinterpreted your question. So, are you saying that is it common to hire freelance designers as a company?
Yeah.
Yes. So, I think it's.
So I guess I'll reiterate. So like, yeah. So for example, if your client was one of the big banks, is it common for like these kind of companies to just hire a full agency instead of hiring an army of like 10, 15 full-time designers to come work internally at the bank?
Yes, and I think a part of that is because it's hard to convince good designers to join a bank full-time. So what they have to do is like offer you a contractor rate and give you a little bit more flexibility to outweigh the negative view of working at a bank.
Gotcha. And are the negative views realized from your experience?
I'm lucky to work for an innovative lab of a bank. So, they're trying to move away from the bank. So a lot of that is reflected in the people they hire in the office. So like, I wouldn't say like for my big bank client, it's like, it's not actually, it doesn't actually feel like I'm working for a bank,
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as a freelance designer, I'd be curious to learn more about how your day actually like looks. So if you were to go through what you did, for example, today, from like the morning until by the time you go to bed, can you kind of walk me through your day for today? So today is a Thursday, and
Yes.
we're recording this 6 p.m. In the afternoon. So
Yep.
yeah, can you kind of take me through your day as a typical designer?
So today I would say is a little bit of an atypical day.
Okay.
I woke up at 7 for an 8 a.m. meeting with one of our big contracts. And that meeting went up until 11. So it was my design partner and I were at their office for that meeting. And then we went our separate ways. I went to my bank client, and I was there up until 5 working. Came here, I'm doing this podcast, and then I'm going to go home, and I have 2 other projects that I'm doing. So that's going to take me all the way to 1 or 2 a.m. And then tomorrow I do that all over again. But instead of starting at 7, I can start a little later.
And we also talked about how I personally don't have a good recollection of what days of the week I'm in, because every day is practically the same for me. I'm just constantly working on building up the podcast and just my company in general. Do you feel that yourself as well?
Yeah, there's no such thing as weekends. There's no such thing as weekdays. Every day is a work day. I lose track of the days all the time.
And how many I guess projects are you handling right now at once?
So let me count. 1, 2. So I used to take on 3 clients at most. I think that was my limit. But I'm really bad at saying no. And things have gotten really busy, and now more and more people are coming to me. So at this moment, I'm taking on 5. And I'm stretched to my limit. So I think that this is where it makes sense to then actually begin to hire people.
Yeah, probably. I think this is where you're trying to make the decision of, I think we're going to be an agency now.
Yeah. Like, even if it's 3 of us, I think that's where we have to move in.
Yeah. Like when we were coming to the elevator, you were talking about how you're running on 3-4 hours of sleep lately. Yep. And that's probably going to impact the amount of creativity you can pump out as a designer. And I think there's a lot of research that shows, being well rested actually allows your brain to be more creative. And I think as a designer, a big part of your job is being creative. And so I think there would be that benefit if you did hire someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And in terms of the role that you play as a designer, though, like, what are you actually doing all day?
What am I doing all day?
Yeah, like, so when you're at this big bank client, are you? So I understand that designers have a tool that, like, they have set tools that they use. Like, for example, people in finance use a lot of Excel, so they stare at a lot of Excel. Like, consultants use PowerPoint. Do designers have to have the tool called it's called Sketch?
Yeah,
right?
So we use Sketch
Yeah.
for UI UX design.
Yeah.
Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator for logo design, InVision for prototyping. So those are the tools we use. But in terms of like what I do, like, a lot of my time isn't actually spent designing. A lot of the time is spent on understanding the why of the business and figuring out like what sort of solution I can come up with to help move the business forward. What sort of ideas or features I can put in an app to make it more engaging. And a lot of that is just me just sitting there sketching, or just me staring blankly into space and figuring that out. So, I'm not always on my computer, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's just looking for inspiration. Sometimes it's playing around with other apps, other websites, understanding what makes that experience so intuitive, so addictive. Because design at the end of the day is just, I would say design is just stealing other good design. Like, most things that are designed are out there and people are using it and they're used to it. So it's like, why come up with new things? So it's just, a lot of my day is just exposing myself to other good design.
Yeah, I don't remember what the exact quote is, but it's along this lines of, I think it might have been Picasso, or I don't know, maybe it's Da Vinci, about how like great artists steal.
Yeah.
And I think that plays this fact of, like, humans have been around for a very long time, and there are plenty of ideas, and similar things keep on getting repeated, and I think it's just the application of so many different things that actually make it seem different, but it might not really be that different from what it was decades ago or generations ago.
Yeah.
But I think like what you're talking about, I can somehow relate to where, when I was at the hedge fund, I would just have hours where I just stare off into this like corner of like the ceiling, where I'm just thinking about like, why the market could be wrong about a stock idea, or where my edge was, and just kind of thinking and trying to reminisce of what am I trying to do here? What is the thesis? What is this company, like, what am I missing? And yeah, I'm just trying to imagine seeing you just sitting there zoning off and thinking about all these different like design ideas. As a designer though, like I feel that like you mentioned before that how you were very, you're a more introverted person, and having a lot of like discussions doesn't really energize you as much. Do you feel that as a designer though, like you need to be like somewhat extroverted to like defend your conviction of like a design and like stand for it as like the product designer? Think this is how it should be, like this is what I think the design should be, and having some kind of like a thesis presentation for it?
Yeah, for sure. I think the role of the designer is also to convince product designers and engineers why your solution makes sense. And a lot of it, the answer isn't always, it makes sense because it looks good and it feels good. Sometimes it makes sense because this is why it's going to benefit the business. And to be able to speak in that language would really help convince and get people on board with your ideas.
And so if for example you had a friend who was an accountant right now and she wanted to go into design, how would you kind of guide her through like the steps or thought process that she should have as a designer? So kind of like if there was some kind of mental checklist that she should apply in terms of, is she even a right fit for design, or if she is a right fit, what would be her next steps then?
I think the first step is to try to see the world as a product designer, as a designer. So, think about the last app or the last experience that you've had that made you think, wow, that was really intuitive, that was really smooth. Think about the last experience that was able to get you from point A to B, and really figure out like why that was so smooth. A good designer's job is to make whatever the problem is easy to solve. So sort of just exposing yourself and thinking about things that way instead of just appreciating something for what it looks like. To be able to dig a little deeper into understanding the why and the how is the first step to being a designer. And
when you personally, like as part of TomYum, like when you're hiring freelancers, or if you did hire when you were at Thanx, did you care about like what the person's like background was, or was it more just heavily weighted on like what their portfolio was?
I think portfolio does have a big part of it, but I much rather like to have a discussion with them about tech companies and startups and see how they're able to this is me personally, okay? So I like to have that discussion, see how they're able to hold up a discussion on that, see what they're able to reference in their examples. That sort of gives me a better idea about the way they think, rather than just looking at their work.
And so then, given like you place a lot of emphasis on how they think, what kind of trait do you think is like really essential to become a good product designer?
That's a good question. I got to think about that for a bit.
Oh yeah, take your time.
I think what it really comes down to, again, is being able to ask the right questions, the right business questions, being able to ask why, and keep digging deeper until you find the true reason for why you're building what you're building, or why someone's asking you to build what they think they want you to build. So I think it's more about understanding the why.
Is there a recent example that you can walk me through of a process that you did of constantly digging through a why?
Not at this moment. I'm sorry, I am sleep deprived.
No worries, man. No worries. A question I get quite often from my accounting friends is just like they ask me for my opinion on what I think about like them doing like boot camps to be designers, boot camps to be like software engineers. So from your standpoint, as someone who came from a non-traditional background to be a designer. What's your point of view on boot camps?
I like them. I think they provide you with a very structured way of what you need to learn, and they give you real world projects to work on, and they're able to like sort of set you on the right path of becoming a designer faster. So like for me to get to where I am, it took many years of just me figuring things out on my own. Whereas if you just do a boot camp in 4 months, the whole curriculum is laid out for you. Everything that you need to do is there. They teach you how to design, how to think. And when you're done the boot camp, you have their network. You're able to leverage that and get a job pretty fast. I think a lot of people who go into these boot camps are able to land a job. So I'm all for them.
Yeah. I think I was talking to one of the venture capital firms, and one of them has like a talent team, and the director was saying how UX UI is one of the hottest jobs right now in Toronto, and just every startup is in need of a UX UI designer. And I think it was Chris Saka from Lowercase Capital who practically said about how design will make the difference for this company's product, because especially if you're like, if people are using it, you need something that is designed well for people to really adopt fast and use and actually develop it into a habit of using. How do you think about like human behavior and habits when you're a designer? Does that apply a lot, like the human psychology aspect when you're designing things?
Yes, all the time. And there's a book that I always like to reference, which is called Hooked. And
yes,
I think you've read it.
Yeah. What's the author's name? E.L.?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that book talks a lot about psychology and talks about like why certain apps or products are addictive, and it really breaks it down into these 4 steps. I think about that all the time. I think about like all the time when I design, I think about like, how can I make this app or this thing I'm designing more addictive? How can I make people think about this as the solution when they encounter a problem?
Mm-hmm.
So all the time.
And so for you personally, like you talked about how you think about making, TomYum's not an agency yet, but there was like the emphasis on the yet.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of vision do you have of what you want to be doing, where you want to be in 10 years out?
10 years out, wow.
Yeah.
I think ideally 10 years out, I'd like to be an investor. But to be an investor, you got to make a lot of money. So from now until then, I need to somehow make a lot of money. Maybe TomYum is going to be sort of what enables that. So ideally, I like to see TomYum become an agency or a larger team of people, of designers, of engineers, and sort of I can leverage that team to start building out. I have a lot of like startup ideas, a lot of business ideas I want to be able to build out. Maybe I can use that team to start building out some of those ideas, as well as doing client projects. Sort of create like a labs division of TomYum, to sort of do these experiential things. And if one thing sticks, becomes a business, grow it or sell it, I don't know, and then become an investor.
Why do you want to be an investor?
Because I like to help other people make their ideas a reality. Like I think capital is a big blocker to a lot of potentially successful ideas, and I want to be able to enable that for people.
So you'd probably want to be in like the early stage, like seed round.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. And I guess this is kind of coming from like, was it like a frustration that you had personally, where you felt like capital was a big block for what you wanted to do?
Yeah, whether it's building my app while I was in university or trying to build TomYum as a food app, just didn't have the capital to hire engineers. Thankfully, like I'm able to cover the design side of things, so that's helpful. But at the end of the day, you still need money.
Yeah.
Unless you know people who are willing to help you for free or join your team for free.
And as we kind of wrap up to the final rounds of this interview, I'd like to ask you some kind of, that one previously was one of the key questions I like to ask, but there are a few also kind of final ending questions I like to ask all guests. One of them is, if the 20-year-old Jason were to look at you right now, so the Jason of third year Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like a 3A term, I think, would be. And what do you think that Jason's emotional reaction to where you are at would be if you were to look at you now?
I think he'd be a little surprised. I was always high achieving, and I always knew like I wanted to do big things when I grow up. But I think I'm a little ahead of where I, plan to be.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, so be happily surprised.
Happily surprised.
Yeah. And if you could give advice to the 20-year-old Jason, like advice you wish you had when you're 20, what kind of advice would you give?
20-year-old Jason, get a design job sooner.
Yeah, like listen to what you really love doing.
Yeah.
Don't hedge.
Exactly.
I think that's an advice one of my mentors also gave me too. When like he runs like a private equity shop, but he also runs a hedge fund on the side. And he was saying, "Nah, don't hedge." No, that's great advice, and I think that's something I continue to try to embrace myself with just what I'm trying to do. But it could just be applied in so many different ways. Like I have a lot of trouble too in terms of, do I go all in just on a podcast, or am I just going to go all in on my company, just in its entirety? So yeah, it's a tough one that I always try to still find an answer for.
Yeah, it's tough to find that answer, and like I'm not great at it myself. I'm diversified across a lot of smaller projects too.
5 different clients.
Like 5 different clients. So I wish I could help you there. But I think what you're doing is good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast despite running on like 3 hours of sleep.
No problem.
All right. No, I really enjoyed our chat today, Jason, and I really do hope our listeners got a great look into like the world of design, and if they want to be designers themselves, can use you as like a data point to chart their course. But so thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, great. Have a good one. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please check out other episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date for the future episodes. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, whichever is applicable to you. To see past episodes, you can go to oldmandan.com/podcasts. Also, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter on my blog, oldmandan.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with future podcast episodes that way, and included in the newsletter are my book reviews I write, my weekly article related to the domain of self-development systems, as well as 7 things I learned throughout the week on being healthy, wealthy, and wise. Finally, special thanks to icons8.com for allowing me to use their music, Tiny People, on the podcast. Great. I will see you all next time. Take care.